Welcome again to another installment of the Weatherford College Speaker Series. We are happy today to have our first CEO, C-suite executive with us today, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jared Howard. I've been knowing this young man for many years, and we're going to allow him to introduce himself, but we're going to jump right in because he's a CEO and his time is valuable. But Jared, how did you get started in your career, and what were the key turning points that led you into leadership?
Yeah, Dr. Pullam, let me say first and foremost, thank you for having me. And always a pleasure to be able to connect with students. Having been working for the last several decades, I understand the value of encounters like this and wish I had more of them. So hopefully your students understand the work you're doing. But my career, started in earnest at birth. What I mean by that is everything about my existence ultimately led to the inception of my career. I am born and raised in Fort Worth. I've got deep roots in the city of Fort Worth. And I think, have always thought and continue to think really highly of the city of Fort Worth. I went to school, as you know, at a place up in Denton called the University of North Texas. And when I got to UNT, I got a rude awakening that other people in Texas and throughout the country didn't think as highly of Fort Worth as I did. Right. Again, I grew up in Fort Worth with deep roots in the city, and so I thought Fort Worth was the Mecca. Only when I got to UNT did I understand that nobody else agreed with me. And if I can be honest with you, Dr. Pullam, it ignited an indignation in me, if you will, to make other people realize the greatness of the city of Fort Worth. And so my first job post graduation at UNT was in the community that I grew up in Stop Six in Fort Worth. And in light of the fact that that's the neighborhood I grew up in, I was working at a bank. In light of the fact that I grew up in that neighborhood, many of the people that came into the bank saw me there as a neighborhood kid and took a great deal of pride in and consequently put a great deal of pressure on me to represent them well. People came in, oh, aren't you so and so's son or you so and so's nephew, right? And so that last fishbowl, if you will, was catalytic to my career. So I left the banking industry in the middle of a major metamorphosis in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I started working at a place called BNSF Railway, which is America's largest railroad company, owned by Mr. Warren Buffett and based in Fort Worth. And I spent time marketing in 12 years there. 10 of those 12 years were in marketing. And you think marketing and railroad, you might be surprised, or your students might be surprised at the amount of freight that moves across U.S. rail networks. Probably everything that they're wearing right now was at one point in time on a train. And so anybody that you can think of where you shop, your Foot Lockers, your Nikes, your Targets, your Walmarts, all of those people move freight on trains, right, as well as they do over the road. And so in my tenure at BNSF, I learned the value of marketing, not necessarily selling, but marketing, right? But the 12 years that I spent at BNSF were great years, great company doing great things and destined for a great future. But I was not passionate about the company I worked for, but I was excited about the skills I acquired. And remember, I mentioned that when I went to UNT, this indignation was born in me to make other people realize how great Fort Worth. And so I took the skills that I learned at places like BNSF and another company called Bell Helicopter here in Fort Worth. And I matched those skills with a particular passion, which is to make Fort Worth realize its true potential. And the combination or the confluence of those things ultimately led to my career now as the CEO of the forthcoming National Juneteenth Museum. Because while we certainly want to tell the Juneteenth story to America, because America doesn't know the story, we want to do it in Fort Worth, right? And we're leveraging this opportunity to make Fort Worth realize her full potential. So I'm really excited about that. Hopefully that wasn't too long, but that's how it came together. A lot of circumstance. I happen to be a person of faith, and so I've always prayed that my steps were ordered, and ultimately this is where I ended up.
No, no, not too much at all. And I think it's very important that, and we have a mix of students. We have those that are the traditional students straight out of high school. that have come here for their associate's degree, and now they're in the bachelor program. We also have seasoned professionals who've been in their jobs 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, who are now trying to break through that glass ceiling of
Yeah.
needing the bachelor degree to start to get to the director, VP level. So the journey is always important,
That's
and
right.
always great to hear how individuals took where they started and then transitioned into new roles. So that was great. Let's move on. Again, this is the bachelor degree in organizational leadership. So when you hear that phrase, what does it mean to you, even now as a CEO, when you hear someone put together those two words and they're talking about a professional setting, what does organizational leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it means being a leader of human beings, right? Whether you are an Eagle Scout in your local Boy Scout troop,
Mhm,
or whether you are the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, you are a leader of human beings. And that's a challenging role, right? Because in many instances, the success or the trajectory of the organization is contingent upon the leadership, right? And so it is not as simple as many people think. Quite frankly, one of the critical components, at least to me, when you talk about organizational leadership, is emotional intelligence. And I don't know if your students are aware of what that means, but I would encourage them to study that concept. We live in an era where everything's at your fingertips. And so, but don't look at the definition, study that, understand that, because in order to be an effective organizational leader, you must be an effective leader of human beings.
mhm,
And the reality is the world that we live in right now seems to be addicted to controversy and adversarial engagement. And so it's more challenging today, perhaps, than it might have been, Dr. Pullam, when you and I were teenagers, where we could be whipped into shape with a couple of words and maybe some wood on our back end from one of our coaches. But coaches can't put wood on the back end of their kids now,
mhm,
right? And so it's a lot more challenging. And so, in order to be an effective leader, organizational or otherwise, I would encourage people to study emotional intelligence and not just study it, but apply it. I'll give you a really quick analogy. One of the challenges that we're seeing in secondary education, and this might be the reality at Weatherford, is the student-teacher ratio, right? The best teachers, certainly the ones that you and I had at our like high school and at UNT and beyond, were the ones that made a personal investment in each student that was in his or her classroom, right? It's really difficult to make a personal investment in each student when you got 500 students in class, right?
mhm,
So when you talk about having 20, 25 people in the class, and I think that's probably somewhere around where Weatherford is, it is incredibly beneficial because it allows the organizational leader, right,
mhm.
to lead these individuals as opposed to one collective, right? And so to the extent that people that are leaders can lead the individuals and not the collective, he or she, I think at least, would be a pretty effective organizational leader.
Absolutely. One of the courses this term that some of our students are taking is called Ethics and Leadership.
Yeah.
Um, Ethics in your role at the top, as the head, as the leader, how critical is ethics in your role, and especially when you are partnering with other groups or looking to fill critical positions, or even um, you're in a building phase right now, and you're looking at plans, and you're looking at um, how those plans are going to be implemented through project management and all of those various things. Tell us about ethics and integrity in your high level role.
Yeah, man. So I would say that in order to practice good, what I consider to be ethical behavior, one must recognize, certainly in leadership, that the decisions that he or she makes will impact other people, right?
Mhm,
And how that decision impacts other people ought to drive the way the decision is made, right? So, case in point, um, it is let's talk about the gentleman of the professional sports team just not even a week ago had an unpleasant encounter with another player on the opposite team who happened to spit on him, right? So while that might have been the way that person was feeling in that particular moment, maybe even justifiable, right? That part is arguable, but what he did impacted the other members of his team and quite frankly could have cost them, right? And so as a consequence, leaders in particular need to be aware of the reality that every decision they make has potentially life impacting implications on other people, whether that's your constituents, your customers, your colleagues, the people that you lead. And to the extent that I think good leaders, this is my perspective because good is relative, right?
Mhm.
And subjective. But I think good leaders understand that every decision they make could negatively or conversely positively impact other people, and they govern themselves based on that. And as far as our organization is concerned, and this is true in my family as well, I prefer not to deal with people who don't understand that and operate that way. To be sure, if you were to work in the organization that I lead and you did not operate that way with some degree of cognizance and sensitivity to how what you do might impact other people, you probably wouldn't last very long. And I think that that bodes well for people. All you have to do is Google the top 100 companies to work for, and you'll find a common denominator amongst their leaders that they actually care about what they do and how it impacts other people. And so I think that's probably a critical component there, Dr. Pullen.
And that goes back to, as you mentioned before, emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
Do you have that ability to be aware?
That's right.
Sometimes in our text they call it EQ, emotional quotient,
That's
and
right.
to say, that deals with the calculus of, did you calculate the cost
That's right.
of what your thought told you to do?
That's right.
So yes, all this ties together. Um, Another course we're engaging in this semester is called conflict negotiation. I'm sure that
Mhm.
throughout your daily schedule and calendar, conflicts arise and you are constantly negotiating for the best interest of not only your organization, but again, as you mentioned, for the people. Tell us your thoughts on conflict and negotiation.
Yeah, I think the awareness of conflict engagement or negotiation is existential in this world we live in right now because conflicts are happening at a clip, at least in our lifetimes, that we haven't experienced before.
Mhm.
People disagree just for the sake of being disagreeable, right? And so conflict is quite frankly unavoidable, but when there are negotiations involved, that means both sides of the conflict are interested in engaging each other because if you're not interested in engaging each other, there wouldn't be any negotiation, right?
Right.
There are restaurants that I will not go to, right? So it doesn't matter how they engage me or attempt to engage me, there's no conflict for us to resolve. I'm simply not going to go there. But the fact that we're talking about conflict negotiation suggests that two parties or more parties are interested in collaborating with each other in some capacity. If that's the case, I think one of the quickest paths to conflict resolution or conflict management is that point of mutual benefit. And this ties in all the things we talked about before, the emotional, the EQ, right? The organizational leadership and the reality that your decisions impact other people, right? At the end of the day, and in many instances, there are scenarios when everybody can win, right? Now, that might mean that not everybody gets the maximum of what they're looking for. But when you're talking about resolving conflict, the goal is to resolve the conflict, not to maximize your win, right? We're not talking about sports. The goal there is to win. In
Mhm.
conflict resolution, I think the objective should be to find that point where everybody's satisfied with the outcome here. And it usually exists, and it's easier to find with people here it is again that are able to practice that emotional intelligence that we're talking about right now. There are some things that one must not do, some phrases one must not use when negotiating. There's a disposition. There are some dispositions people should steer clear of when you're looking to resolve conflict. Case in point, condescension, right? And I don't know if many of your students may or may not know what that word means, but I encourage you to go Google it. And because if I'm in negotiations with someone and I sense condescension, negotiations have ended right then and right there. And so if I feel that way about being condescended toward, certainly the partner that I'm negotiating with would probably feel the same way. And if that's true, it's incumbent upon me not to exhibit those behaviors that would make another person feel that way. And so, again, I think the key to conflict resolution and conflict negotiations are to identify that point to where everybody wins, right? Maybe you don't win as much as you wanted to, but I
Mm,
think a mutual win is better in most cases anyway.
absolutely. Thinking about these bachelor degree students, and they're going to be embarking upon new journeys, whether
Yeah.
it's breaking through that management ceiling or trying to get that new position, or it's their first journey into the professional world, professional setting. What are some practical tips, advice, or
Yeah.
lessons learned that you would share with students preparing to enter the workforce?
Yeah, great question, Dr. Pullam. I would encourage your students to start from the end and go backward, right? What do you mean when you say that? So the reality is we live in an economy that is wrought with people who don't have degrees,
Mhm.
right? And I am an advocate of education and encourage everybody who needs or desires one to get one. But I have a 25-year-old son who is operating an equestrian center right here in the city of Fort Worth, right? He loves horses and everything about them, can't get away from it. A few years ago, he was in school at Prairie View A&M University down in South Texas, and he was in an architecture program. And early on during his tenure, his mother and I didn't try to discourage him. We just tried to make him consider the viability of ultimately becoming an architect. Because if you know anything about architecture, just having a degree is not enough. You
Mhm.
have to have proven bona fide skills in that sector to be viable in the workplace. Because there are so few opportunities available and really talented people looking for those opportunities. And so we didn't think that he had the wherewithal or the work ethic for that particular discipline early on. And so we tried to discourage him from choosing architecture as a major because at this particular institution, they have a track, which means every semester your coursework is selected. You don't get to say, I want to do this, I want to do that. We were not opposed to him pursuing architecture. We just wanted him to pursue general studies so that in the event he ultimately decided that he didn't want to do architecture, he could pivot without losing so many hours and wasting so much time, energy, and money. Right. I say that because now he dropped out after his sophomore year, and many would say, well, why would he drop out of college? Well, because it was the right thing for him to do, because what he's doing now does not require a degree. Would a degree benefit him? By all means, but a degree in 2025 is also quite expensive. It's a very expensive proposition. And so, as a consequence, if he ultimately wants to operate an equestrian center, then the monies that we were going to pay for him to go get an architecture degree that he might not ever use could be
Mhm.
leveraged to go buy some real estate for him to go and operate his equestrian center. And so, as a consequence, we pivoted the direction of the resources that we were pouring into him. And now he has a fully operational equestrian center in the heart of the city of Fort Worth. The point I'm making is start from your goal backward. If you're going to be, I know Weatherford has an incredible music school. If you're going to write scores, right, for Paramount Pictures, you probably need some credentials. If
Mhm.
you're going to be, a brain surgeon, no one's going to allow you to work in their practice or to operate on their loved one if you don't have the necessary credentials. And so, if those are the goals, then by all means, go and do the things that are necessary to achieve those goals. Conversely, if you ultimately want to be a barber, and guess what, Dr. Pullum, I spend $40 every time I go to the barber shop, right? And I'm in the chair 15, 20 minutes. It's a pretty
Mhm.
good pay, right? And so it's consequence, but I don't know that the value proposition of a 4-year degree will pay for itself if what you ultimately want to do is be a barber. You can go to barber school and in 6 months you've got a license, and the money that you were going to use to pay for, a college degree can be used to buy some real estate. And so now you get paid when you're off because now not only are you a master barber, but you've got stalls that you lease out to other people that are making you money that allow you to make money when you're not off. And so my encouragement is start with the goal backward. Don't be aimless. Don't be like I was. Don't just go through school because someone told you needed to go through school. Be intentional about your major. Be intentional about the schools that you attend. Be as intentional about the coursework. And if those things don't align with what your ultimate goal is, then maybe take a step back, refocus, and identify the goal, and then go from there. It is encouragement, Dr. Pullen, that I wish I would have gotten, when we met each other almost 40 years ago. I probably spent a lot of years aimlessly wandering without any real focus. It was only when I was probably about 30 years old when things started to come into focus for me. And so I would encourage people to start with the goal and go backward. There's a quick book that your students might be interested in reading called Start with Why, right? Start with the why. Why am I doing this? Am I going to Weatherford just because my mom and dad told me to? Maybe that's a good reason for you. But if you're going to Weatherford just because this is what people have always done and you think this is what, but your spirit, you're not committed to it, don't waste your time, energy, or money. And I think Dr. Pullam would agree with me there. So that's what I would encourage them to start with the goal and go backward.
Absolutely. And plug to Weatherford College that does have an equine program. So
Mhm.
it would be great if he would come over here and connect with some of the instructors and see what we have out here. I need to go check myself.
Hmm.
But we appreciate your time. Last question.
Yep.
How do you see leadership changing? Um, and I typically I wrote this question to say 5 or 10 years, but things are moving so fast. So within the next 2 to 5 years, how do you see leadership changing in your perspective, whether it's your industry, whether
Yeah.
it's Fort Worth, whether it's Texas as a whole? How do you see leadership changing?
Yeah, I think when you and I were in grade school and in undergrad and getting our advanced degrees, emotional intelligence was optional,
Mm,
right? It was something that was a nice to have.
mhm,
But as we go forward in our in the socio-political direction of our country right now, I think emotional intelligence is existential, right? To leaders because very few people are interested in leading an organization or a group or a club where polarization sits at the center of how they operate, right?
mhm,
And one of the ways to mitigate the likeliness of you dealing with innate and abject amounts of polarization is to be emotional intelligence. I know I'm beating that horse, Dad, but I think if some of our current leaders in our organizations, in our companies, in our schools were more, had a higher EQ, I think the organizations that they lead would stand to benefit from that. And so, you all, it is not optional for you. It was optional for Dr. Pullam and myself, right? It was something that we could have benefited from, but it is necessary for you. And so, if there's coursework, if there's a study that one can do to better understand emotional intelligence, it will make you a better leader in whatever capacity, whether that's you leading your household, you leading your organization, you leading your company, you leading a country. You will be the better leader if you have high EQ. And so again, I would just encourage people to be cognizant of the fact that their decisions impact other people, certainly as leaders. And one of the ways to do that is to have a grasp on this whole emotional intelligence concept that we've been talking about for the last few minutes.
We are so very thankful for your time, your insight, your thoughts, and the opportunity to um, even see behind the curtain of the C-suite. I think it's so important for students, for young professionals, for old professionals to understand at the highest levels of uh, corporate governance,
Mm,
professionalism, that we hear what how the leaders think, because ultimately it gets back down to our level, and
mhm,
our level as the consumer, our level as the persons who have to deal with these decisions that are made. It's good to know that we have people in leadership positions who know what they're doing, who are emotionally intelligent, but they think about the people who are affected most
mm.
by the decisions that they make. So thank you again, sir. We appreciate it. Anytime you'd like to come out to Weatherford, we are growing. The campus is beautiful, and it's just on the other side of Fort Worth. So thank you so very much, and we appreciate having you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And blessings to you, Dr. Pullum, and to your students. Y'all have a great semester.